Today I'm going to show you the first exercise we do in class, which teaches you how to saw pierce your metal, cutting it out in different patterns using this here. We learn how to cut a straight line, a wavy line, a zigzag and a very wiggly line. We're going to do this on copper as this is a base metal and not too expensive for a practice. So what we're going to do is learn how to use the jeweler's saw, which is this piece of equipment. You'll use this in most projects that you do, so it's good to know what you're doing. And we're going to be using a tiny little saw like this, and it has to be nice and tight in your frame, because if it's slack it's not going to cut so well. So to begin with, you want to take your pattern and a piece of double-sided tape and stick this double-sided tape onto your metal. Make sure your metal's nice and clean. If it isn't, you can use a piece of emery paper to clean it up, but this is new so it shouldn't be necessary for now. Stick this on in the corner. Rub it on. Cut off any excess. Then you want to peel it off. Like this. And stick your pattern on. Put the line up to one edge like this as neatly as you can. Double-sided tape is much better to use than glue because it's much stronger and it doesn't dry out or lift off your pattern, so you don't have anything to follow. It's much the best thing to use for cutting out your designs. So stick this into the corner like that, and then basically it's ready to go. The next thing I'm going to do is show you how to load your saw into your saw frame. You'll notice in your box I gave you, you have a bundle of saw blades like these. So open them up and take one out. You'll see here it's very thin and hard to see if you don't look closely. So I don't know if that's in focus, it probably isn't, but there's lots of tiny little teeth on here. If you stroke it and it's smooth, your teeth are facing outwards and downwards, which is what you want. If it's the wrong way up and you stroke it, and you can see my fingers jaggery like this, the teeth are pointing upwards. You don't want that because it's not going to cut. So make sure you turn it over and it's smooth. Then we're going to load it into the saw frame. You put your peg on your bench like this because this is what the jewelers work from. This is our bench peg, which is where we support all our work. Pop your frame into the little groove here to support it, and the other side is just supported up on my chest or shoulder blade. I'm just going to take this one out, and then to put it back in again, make sure your teeth are pointing outwards and downwards. Tighten it up in the top bolt. Make sure you've got enough length for it to go down into the bottom. Make it nice and tight. And then the same for the other end. I think it's gone off shot, but I'll move the camera a little bit. Bring this into this bolt down here. As you're tightening this, you want to put pressure on it because you want the blade to be nice and tight and not slack, otherwise it's not going to cut and it's going to snap. So as you're tightening it, you can see here the blade is bowing a little bit. Put pressure on it to make sure it pings back nice and tight. And tighten it up with the bolts. You want to be looking for something that sounds like this, like in an orchestra. So once you're happy with this, we're going to go ahead and cut our jigsaw pattern out. Move this back. To help cut, you can use a little bit of beeswax. You just gently run it down your saw, and that helps lubricate it and stops it sticking too much. Don't forget, we're cutting through copper, paper and glue, so it's going to be harder than when you come to cut your silver without any of this on it. So I'm sure you'll do fine. What you want to do is find a position on your peg which is comfortable for you, and with your left hand or your right hand, whichever is your dominant, you want to hold on to your work pretty tightly, probably tighter than you imagined to begin with, because you don't want it slipping around. And then I'm going to position this over the opening here in my peg so my saw can cut through like this. Try and keep as straight as possible for this, because the idea for this project is to do this as precisely as possible, because after this it's going to be a solder project where once you've cut all your pieces, we're going to put them back together like a jigsaw and solder them back together. It's a lesson to teach you about different solder grades, and that if there's any gaps, it's not great, but it's not the end of the world on this, because it's just a practice, just to teach you. So to go in with your saw, you want to start with an upward motion. Don't have your saw at a funny angle like this, like you're sawing a loaf of bread. You want it nice and straight, perpendicular, up and down like this. Imagine like there's a weight on the end here, and it's pulling your hand up and down slowly. Don't go too fast like this or be too hectic, because it's not going to help you. Just take it easily and we'll go for it. So you can put your thumb up against where your blade's going to go in, just to guide it. Hold on to your work here with an upwards motion. You get your teeth adhered into your metal, and then you start cutting. Cut to the side of the line rather than on the line. It's just good practice, because then later on when you come to cut out a pattern, you can then file it back to the line rather than losing too much metal. So we're going to cut this now straight as possible. Up and down. You'll see some dust appearing here. You can just blow it out of the way, or use a little paintbrush if you've got one. I think there's one in your box. That's known as Lemel. That's metal dust, which, as you can see on my bench here, is that you can collect it and then recycle it later. But we're not going to be doing that here. So don't worry about that, and we'll just cut through. And we've cut off the straight line. So we've got this piece. Save that for later, because we're going to want it for the soldering exercise. When you're cutting your work, make sure as much as possible that you keep your fingers behind your work, not holding it in front like this, or leaning your hand over like this to cut your work, because I've seen that and it's dangerous, because if you slip, this cuts like butter. So just be cautious that your fingers aren't in the way. As much as possible, try and keep your fingers behind your work. So for the wave, we're going to do that next. It's basically exactly the same. In with an upward stroke to get your teeth of your blade in, and then as your curve goes, move your work with it like this. I'll demonstrate so you can see what you're going to do. So again, put your blade in at the top, a little upwards nick to get your teeth in. I might zoom in a little bit for you. And then we're just going to cut a little bit more wax if it's sticky. Whoops. just follow that curve round as smoothly as possible. Pivot your saw a little bit as you go around that curve, but keep it nice and smooth. Again, keep your saw nice and straight and up and down like this. And then you can move your metal with your work to follow the pattern. Keep going. And there we've got the wave done. So that will sit up against this. And now the slightly trickier one is this zigzag. As you can see, we've got 90-degree corners here, sharp points. We want to keep them at that angle. So I'm going to show you how to do that with the saw. And this is probably the most testing one out of these, but I'm sure you'll be able to do it. So again, go from the side which you feel most comfortable with. I think I'll start on here. Pop your blade in, hold on to your work. And for this one, I'm going to go a bit slower so I can show you what I'm doing. Go up to the top of the point here of the V. And stop here when you're at the top. When you're at the top of the point here, you want to go up and down slowly in the same place like this, and slowly pivot your saw as you're doing it. If you can see, I'm slightly going round, but keep moving your saw blade up and down in the same place. This removes just enough metal for your saw to be able to turn round in that space. Rather than just going up and turning, it would make a curve and it wouldn't be a nice sharp point. So doing this makes a nice sharp corner. Now I've done that enough, you can turn it around and go back the other way. So again, remember, move your work if your fingers end up in front of it, and come back the other way. And this will make for a nice sharp V. And then you can go down the other straight and up into the point here, up and down in the same place until enough metal's removed so you can then move your blade and go back down on the other straight angle. Keep going. You can see the dust building up here. That's where the metal is being removed by the saw for us to be able to turn it around and then go back down the other way. I'm going to speed up now because I don't want to bore you. Again, up and down in the same place. You see it got a little bit sticky there. That's where you want to go in and use a bit more wax. And up the other straight. Remember, fingers behind your work. Up and down at the point. Keep going until you can turn it around. And then down. Let's see if I can find a brush. So if you've got your paintbrush, it's much easier just to do this and get rid of all that dust so you can see where your pattern's going next. So again, up and down in the point here, slowly as the metal's being removed, pivot your saw round and go back down the other straight. Same here. Remove the dust. And back up the other way. Last one, little bit of wax. This copper's quite a sticky metal. Up and down at the point. And back down. The last one. And we're through. So now we can see if these fit together nicely. What you're looking for ideally is no gaps like that. For example, if you've not cut it totally straight and it's a bit wibbly wobbly and you have a gap like this, this is going to be very hard to fill up with solder because it's too big a gap. For your solder joints, you want it as nice and tight as possible, like that. I'll talk about solder and what it is on the next stage, but I don't want to rush ahead. It's basically an alloy which melts at a lower temperature that bonds your two pieces together. So the last one we're going to do is this wibbly wobbly line here. So again, now you've done these three, I think you'll whiz through this last one. Get the angle that you feel most comfortable with. Get your saw blade in here. A little nick upwards. And then just follow your pattern. As you did with the smoother wave, slightly move your metal and pivot your saw as the pattern goes. We'll take it slowly. I've made this a little bit tight, so it's harder to turn the corner without my fingers getting in the way. But just be careful and mind as much as possible that you have yours behind your work. Again, a nice straight angle up and down like this with your saw. No tipping like this and hacking through like that. If you see it at this angle, drop it back down and make your wrist more relaxed and go like this. It will help you with your piercing, I promise. If it gets a little bit sticky, as you can hear there, a little bit more wax will help you. You see how I'm moving the metal slightly as I'm following the curve? Don't worry if you snap your blade. You might have snapped one by now. You've got a bundle of 12 in there. Just put another blade back in and carry on. It's very normal to snap saws. So keep going. Try not to break mine. If you put too much pressure or at the wrong angle, or your saw blade isn't tight enough, these are all factors that can help snap your blade. So just make sure that the saw's nice and straight, nice and tight, and you're not going too fast, with too much pressure. done this, I'm also going to give you a pattern to cut out, and that you can turn into something wearable. Nearly at the end. It gets harder as it gets to the edge because you've got less metal to hold on to, but just try and support it as much as you can without going into your fingers. Move it behind just to get that last curve. Move the metal with it and come off at the end. And we're done. So here's the rest of the pattern. Let's see if it fits together. So that's nice and tight. If you can turn it over and have a look at it that way, you can see this here will be a nice line for our solder to flow up that's tight together. Let's see how the other pieces fit. Let's see if the zigzag fits. Pop that in, and the curve and the straight line. So we've got it pieced together. The next stage of this is you're going to take off the paper, clean the metal, because your metal has to be totally clean for when we come to solder it. Solder doesn't like any dirt or grease or stickiness. So I'm going to show you how to do that next. And we're going to solder the two parts separately together like this. We're going to split them. So we're going to put this one on, this one, those two separately with different grades, and then finally we're going to pop that together to make the jigsaw hole again with a different grade of solder. But that's for next time. So this is what we're going to do today, and cut out a pattern. For example, all of these pieces here I've cut out in the same fashion that I've just shown you there. Again, I follow a pattern on a piece of paper, and this one like a mandala, and this one I've got some leaves and butterflies and different things that you might like to do, or you can just draw your own. It's entirely up to you. But so this is the first thing we're going to do, is saw piercing. I hope you've enjoyed watching it, and now you can have a go. Thank you. Bye.